Hi all, and welcome to the Truth, Honour and Integrity show. A little later than scheduled. Rare for us to be late. Well, we weren't late, but we just had to add some more into the show. So look forward to that. Tonight is January the 25th. Hi all, and welcome back to the Truth, Honour and Integrity show. My name's Thomas Williams. We've got a packed show tonight. We had 3 shows in 4 days last week. That kind of set a tone in many ways. Thursday's Intel pointed out who the real problem was. Saturday's show with Hayden Ellis, he covered a lot of things to do with the Kingdom of Manor and the World Trust and where we were going with that and how things could potentially play out. And then I left people in, I did a piece at the end because I didn't want to kind of ruin, it was Hayden's show, not mine, but I felt it was important to put out because of the issues with the shutdown. And I did that piece, and I left no stone unturned who the problem was. This was Saturday night, not Sunday, and the military being the problem, and the Pentagon and a few others who have been in bed with the Roths and have been stealing the American people's money in huge amounts, trillions and trillions. And it's way higher than some of the figures are put out. And I thought, let's see what happens. Well, things did happen. And we'll be covering some of that. And then on Sunday, some didn't like it too much. And I do get that. Why is it just Thomas that gets challenged? Well, in essence, we should all be challenged. Well, as you well know, not many want to put themselves forward. And maybe that's an indicator that not many are real, truthful or valid. Time will tell, as it always does. But it was a good show, and it's always a good show when we go on with Alan and Steve. And we always have a laugh along the way, and I'm going to try and keep my gulping down. I may start gurgling instead. Some people don't like the gulping and the later clicking. Well, I may do it all in one go and get a drum kit and set the drums off as well. But these are the things we have to put up with. And let's get into the show. I haven't decided yet whether to switch things round. We're going to have the news item. I may do the op-ed, depending on between now and the next hour. I may do the op-ed straight after the news item and then leave the rather large amount of intel for the end. And we'll see how that goes anyway. Right, let's get into the emails and all the details of the show and whatnot. And the email for the show is truth.honour.and.integrity@gmail.com. For those of you in Europe, it's honour is spelt the American way without the U. I know some have struggled with that. And the link for the show is www.spreaker.com/user/8955881. The articles website that's gaining a lot of content now, thanks to Michael Jacquin. That's all his work. So you want to give him some credit. Because he did all that, and the People's Club as well. And there's all the live. There's a live link there, so you can listen to the show live from that site. All the archives are there, and there's a special section for the bigger shows we've done. And for those of you who are new, you may want to catch them in sequential order. You'll catch up very quickly of what this show's all about and where we're at. So that's thinkdifferent.thepeoplesclub.org. We have the Facebook social media alternative called MeWe. And if you want to send your email address to the truth, honour and integrity at gmail.com, we can add you into that. And we have the People's Club donation website link, all about the foundation that we hope to get funding for sooner rather than later. We'll see. Some promising signs going on currently. And that's thepeoplesclub.org. Right. Let's get into some news items. Kind of boring in many ways. Say some, but we do have some input on it of what's going on, and we can give some insight into some of the things that's going on. So the shutdown was averted and the lawmakers agreed to fund the government through to February the 8th. Not quite 2 weeks, but nearly 2 weeks. After McConnell, the Republican of Kentucky, said he would address the status of young immigrants called the Dreamers, who were brought to this country illegally as children. And the pact came at a time when trust has been in short supply on Capitol Hill, and it kind of unnerved a lot of the liberal activists, whoever they are, who weren't sure whether to believe McConnell. McConnell went on and delivered a carefully worded speech on the Senate floor, stating that it was his intention to address the DEMA issue, but didn't state when. Anyway, that averted the government shutdown. We'll have the full details of that in the intel. So we may address the Dreamer issue in the next spending bill, or it may come after. There was no specific promise to protect Dreamers, and he suggested that he would offer nothing if the government was shut down again. So there's a lot of fun and games going on, none of which is beneficial to the people. Well, they argue, and it just goes on and on. The Congressional Budget Office said earlier this month that the federal budget deficit reached $228 billion in the first 3 months of the current fiscal year, which is $18 billion more than the deficit in the first quarter of 2016 through 2017. And now this is despite what has been forecast as strong economic growth. And still the budget is in the negative. Well, I think I covered in the last week's show and that piece on Saturday the reasons why. So the deficit is increasing, and that's before all these latest round of tax cuts kicks in. So that's still to be added in. So the US Defense Secretary James Mattis delivered a speech this week also that was rather telling and kind of disappointing in many ways, but again, you know why. And he has said competition between great powers, not terrorism, is now the main focus of America's national security. You get tired of hearing that term, national security. It comes under the whole banner of things, national security. We'll have another bit on national security later. And the US faced growing threats from revisionist powers as different as China and Russia, he said, unveiling the National Defense Strategy policy. And in an apparent reference to Russia, he warned against threatening America's experiment in democracy. It's news to me. I thought we were a republic, not a democracy, but there you go. If you challenge us, Mr. Mattis said, it will be your longest and worst day. America's been gripped by ongoing investigations, as we all know, into alleged collusion between the Trump 2016 election campaign and Russia. That still goes on. I don't know how you, but I'm getting tired of it all. It's just either he did it or he didn't. It doesn't take nigh on 18 months to decide whether he did or he didn't. I think we all know the answer by now. So Mr. Masters, who was speaking in Washington, also appealed to Congress to fund the military adequately and refrain from indiscriminate and automatic cuts to the US federal budget. He doesn't complain about the indiscriminate and automatic cuts to the American people, does he? I've not heard one politician moan about that or raise that concern. It's always about military cuts. It's over-bloated, it doesn't work, and doesn't provide anything that benefits the people, in my opinion. Maybe they'll realign fairly soon, we'll see. Now, President Trump announced he is seeking to boost defence spending by 10%, or $54 billion, in his proposed budget plan for this year, and hopes to recoup that sum through deep cuts elsewhere, including to foreign aid. Rotterdam police. This is from Holland. You think the police powers can't get any worse, and then you read stories like this. The Rotterdam police in Holland are now targeting youths wearing outfits that appear too fancy for them to afford. Really? The authorities say the controversial practice will help reduce crime in the Dutch port city, and Rotterdam police will soon deploy officers specifically trained to identify people whose clothes don't seem to match their assumed income. You know, have they all got chips, so they know how much you're earning? It's not taking into account it's just been Christmas, and aunts and uncles and grandparents buy all kinds of fancy clothes for people who don't have any. Or maybe they went to the Oxfam shop and bought it there. This beggars belief. And the local police say the measure will help reduce crime. No, it'll help increase targeting and help increase the public mistrust in the police. Because you're relying, to be quite honest, I'll put this aside for a minute, it's putting an awful lot of pressure on the police. Because how do they, what measures are put forward whereby they decide that X person doesn't earn enough to wear those clothes? Is it colour? Gender? You know, it's setting the police up, because they're the ones that are going to face the anger of the public. Maybe it's time the police told them where to go with these ridiculous policies. I think it's way past time, because that's putting people in a wrong position, that they have to make a decision on a person whether they're assuming they've got no income. They don't know. They can't prove it. And so it's just, what are you going to do? Pull everyone up? Show us your bank account? Show me how many credit cards you got? Well, we'll have to access your bank account. You can see where all this is going with these clowns. What if the guy turns around and says, well, I earn $50,000 to $100,000? Well, the police going to say, prove it. It's a bad path, and the police should refuse to implement it, because it's not putting them in a good position either way. And I can see some of those incidents going wrong where violence will ensue, and no doubt a load of other people will get killed by cops. It's out of order. Now, it appears that the minority groups, go figure, will be more affected by the move than the native Dutch. They are often young guests who consider themselves untouchable, according to the Rotterdam police chief, Frank Pauw. We are going to undress them on the street, he stated. Nice terminology. And police will be scanning for luxury watches, which are a symbol of status for young people. And officers will also be on the lookout for expensive jackets and exclusive coats. People that police are going to target do not have any income. Again, I question, who determines that? And how are they determining it? So the question is how they get their clothes. We know they have clothes that are too expensive to wear with money they get, and we will be dealing with them, said Frank Pauw, the police spokesperson. You see, you can't make this stuff up, but oh dear. North Korea. Mr. Kim Jong-un is kind of in trouble, because family members of a Japanese abduction victims want to take the North Korean leader to court for what they say are human rights abuses. The relatives are heading to The Hague this week to ask the International Criminal Court to launch a case against the North Korean leader for failing to provide information on the whereabouts of their loved ones. And while they're at The Hague, they will hand over a petition demanding an investigation into the abductions of more than 100 Japanese. And the relatives say Kim Jong-un knows where a number of their family members are, and or whether they are alive or not. And if they are alive, that their freedom is being severely restricted, according to the Japanese news. Now, the majority of these disappeared ones were in the 1970s. Some of you have, we mentioned this last month, I think, about the Canadian billionaire and his wife that died in an alleged murder-suicide. But now it appears our suspicions have been confirmed, and a private investigation has reached a different conclusion, that Barry and Honey Sherman were allegedly killed in a double homicide. Mr. Sherman, 75, and a CEO of a generic drug company called Apotex, and his philanthropic wife, Honey Sherman, were found dead in their home in North Toronto last month. Now, the CEO was allegedly worth near $5 billion at the time of his death. Nice little collection, that. That's probably why he died. They're that short of funds, and they'll do anything to keep going. Anyway, shortly after Toronto police began investigating their deaths as a possible murder-suicide, now the Toronto Star is reporting the Shermans may have been murdered in a contract killing, citing new evidence from a private and family investigation that included a second autopsy that was conducted shortly before the funeral. Both Shermans died by ligature neck compression. A first autopsy of the bodies concluded, and the initial report said the couple died by hanging. But the new autopsy, I beggars belief why it was missed on the first, but there you go. Maybe someone was covering it up. Determined that the men's leather belts were reportedly used to strangle the couple, and also determined that they did not die by hanging. Oops. Somebody else has been playing fun and games. a lot of issues and entities in that particular city, I might add, Toronto. FBI Director Christopher Wray has allegedly, you have to say everything allegedly politically these days because there's that much BS about he said, she said. It just goes on each week. Just change the names around. Maybe it's deliberate. Anyway, allegedly he's threatened to resign after Attorney General Jeff Sessions pressured him to remove FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. Wray reportedly told Sessions that he would resign if McCabe was removed from his post. Sessions also reportedly told White House counsel Don McGahn about Wray's response to the pressure for him to fire McCabe. McGahn replied by telling Sessions that McCabe wasn't worth losing Wray for. And according to reports, if Wray had resigned, he would be the second FBI director to leave during President Trump's administration. It's like musical chairs. Of course, the first FBI director that was fired was James Comey. And his name still crops up in investigations ongoing. One day those investigations will end and we'll get some truth out. House Ethics Committee announced on Monday it is opening an investigation into allegations that Republican Patrick Meehan sexually harassed a staffer and misused his office budget to pay a settlement. No surprise there. And the investigation comes after the New York Times reported over the weekend that Meehan used thousands of taxpayer dollars to settle a complaint after a former female staffer accused him of making unwanted romantic advances. The Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, was following the story's publication, urged Meehan to repay the full cost of the settlement and moved to strip Meehan of his position on the House Ethics Committee. That's a laugh in itself. Someone on the Ethics Committee not acting too well. Again, it's not a surprise, is it? The Ethics Committee member acting unethically. Go figure. Vaccine pushers are now resorting to extreme threats of violence and mass shootings to try to silence vaccine truth researchers, authors and lecturers. This was a report this week. In the last 48 hours, Dr. Susan Humphries, who is the creator of the Honesty versus Policy presentation and author of Dissolving Illusions, which I'm told expertly dismantles the primary myths of the pseudoscience vaccine industry. And she received a shockingly detailed death threat that promises a suicide mission, in inverted commas, a mass shooting at a public autism event. So the Dr. Suzanne Humphries is going around the country, as I understand it, exposing the links of vaccines with autism, and there's a number of these public events, and the vaccine people are threatening to do a mass shooting at them. It's time those people were shut down. In fact, there's a time a lot of people were shut down. It's beyond time. Now, this was announced today. Special Counsel Robert Mueller seems to be zeroing in on the question of whether Donald Trump obstructed justice. Apparently, there's now 3 counts of obstructed justice. Whether it's proven or it's more of the BS remains to be seen, like everything else these days. But not all experts agree that the public evidence alone is enough to make a clear or strong case. It doesn't seem to matter, and the White House and the Departments of Justice and the agencies just say and do what the bloody hell they like and just carry on. Till we get a proper oversight of all these people, people-based oversight, this circus-style behaviour continues. This is not yet the type of case we'd ordinarily see an obstruction of justice indictment come out of, said Laurie Levinson, a former prosecutor and law professor at Loyola. And Levinson emphasises that we don't know the full extent of what Mueller might have on Trump, and if we limit ourselves to what is publicly known, though, she said, it's troubling conduct that warrants an investigation. And Schumer, who allegedly shut down the government this week, also got involved. Yes, Schumer was responsible for shutting down the government, according to Anna von Reitz, to cancel Trump's continuation of service. It was a year and a day. That then enforces all the executive orders of the previous year, according to Anna. I haven't had time to clarify whether that statement is correct or not, but you have to have a year and a day. And with the government shutting down, that was stopped, and that was done by Schumer. And now we've got Schumer and Mr. Mueller trying to go after Donald Trump on trumped-up charges, obstructed justice. Perhaps those two names, Mueller and Schumer, are indicative. Make your own mind up on that. I've covered it often enough. Faction games. Assistant Attorney General Stephen Boyd has told the House Intelligence Committee Chairman, Republican Devin Nunes, in a letter Wednesday that releasing a memo prepared by the committee's staff alleging abuses at the Departments of Justice and FBI would be extraordinarily reckless. Really? For whom? It's not reckless for the people. We want to know the truth. And Republicans have been urging for the release of the memo, which, as Boyd pointed out, likely contains highly classified information. In the letter obtained by CBS, Boyd highlights how crucial it is that the committee does not release the memo to the public for reasons of, wait for it, national security. It's those two words again. You know, don't put anything dodgy out because we'll just say it's national security. Can't tell you about aliens, national security. Can't tell you about this, national security. It's the stock. Those two words are the stock blocker on everything in this country. Audit the Fed, national security. Audit the military, national security. What went on in Benghazi? Can't say, national security. I could reel them off for another hour. What about the people's security? That we've got good people operating for and on behalf of the people like they're supposed to be doing, you know, like we pay them to do that. Instead of putting up this BS national security on anything that exposes anything or anyone. Like I said, we need a People's Committee, Oversight Committee, investigating the whole lot. Not just allow them to investigate themselves. It's a bit like the police investigating police abuse. Like you get any truth out of that. We need an outside team to go through the whole lot, in my opinion. Then we can start afresh and with transparency. Because far too much in this country has come under the banner of national security, which involves crimes against the people, be it knowledge, finance, wars, you name it, all prevented and blocked because of national security. Well, the memo describes the FBI's supposed abuses of the Foreign Intelligence Service Act, FISA. We believe it would be extraordinarily reckless for the committee to disclose such information publicly without giving the department and the FBI the opportunity to review the memorandum and advise the committee of the risk of harm to national security. There goes that word again. So the memo is exposing the Department of Justice and the FBI. And this clown, what's his name again? Attorney General Stephen Boyd is advising people to give the memo to the Department of Justice and the FBI, who are being investigated, and allow them to decide whether it should be put out because of national security. These people should all be on a short bus. I'm sorry. And so they're asking that the FBI and the Department of Justice reviews the memorandum first, in case there's harm to national security and to ongoing investigations that could come from public release. Mr. Boyd wrote, "Indeed, we do not understand why the committee would possibly seek to disclose classified and law enforcement sensitive information without first consulting with the relevant members of the intelligence community." Really? Yet again, another example why we need an oversight team. Right, we're going to have a music break. That's the end of the news. I think I'm going to go into the op-ed pieces and leave the intel till last tonight. Let's change it up a bit, freshen it up. Where are we going with music? This was posted by one of the members, the Youngbloods. Let's get together. Let's play that. Nightmare. Hi all and welcome back. That last one was for those of you listening to An Evening with Thomas series, Zoozander. That was his song, Update Your Operating System, indeed. Right, let's get into some op-ed pieces, and we'll leave the fairly extensive intel till last. And these op-ed pieces, I'm hoping this is the last time I have to do this type of op-ed piece, but we kind of got challenged on Sunday, and that's fine by me. Like I said, I'm prepared to put myself out there, and I'm prepared to stand by what I've said in all shows and all comments. And but one or two of OYM's members were starting to question certain things, like how is it the case that only Thomas has the truth? Well, I've never said that, although it's heading more to a minority few than a large collective, which is what we all thought it was. And that saddens me more than anything. But before we get into that, I kind of hate to tell you this, but and it will not really be borne out. Some of you will have already noticed until later, or people who see through the illusion now. But the alternative media is now being used as a tool to discredit anything of any validity. Some of you will have already noticed that it's being used as a tool. They couldn't get their way and they're realising more and more people are walking away from the portal people and the mainstream media. People are just not buying it anymore. And this is why they create the fake news meme. And that was designed to deflect and distract you from what is real and what is not. It's all a ball of confusion. And things were already difficult to discern, as we all know. But where it's got to now is it's almost become nigh on impossible in the alternative media. You know, as more, I've said all along, people will expose themselves, and we've all heard the stories of that, and I'll cover some of that shortly. But it just bothers me, it just really bothers me how the depth of it. That's what I find extraordinary. I never imagined. You knew there was agents in it. I knew that from day one. They don't let everything run free. They always try to control everything, as you know. Why? Because they're weak and cowardly. That's why. Only the weak and cowardly have to control others. But it's not just the alternative media. The TV advertisements now have a plethora of adverts, again designed to mock the alternative media platform and those who inside it, who try to bring the truth and expose it. And it's not just the Taco Bell advert either. There are far more others, more subtle ones. That's all in your face once you look properly. And this is the latest theme that they're pulling. Because as more join the alternative media news, and it's all its different guises, that's the last thing they want, of people finding out that life's not what they thought it was. But in essence, this is a victory for the alternative media, that they've had to pay us this much attention to distort everything. But it saddens me how easily people fall into the same trap again, even in our own group. Suddenly a new group pops up out of nowhere, and it's splashed all over Twitter and various alternative media sites and blogs, much fanfare, much promises, and again stating it's all happening. I throw in a giant post of cryptic comments, codes, and bits of already stated information, chunks of which have come from our show, add in a few keywords from our show, and bingo. We have a new white hat group called Q. It's not as if that description I've just given has ever happened before in the alternative media. It has numerous times. Mass arrest, etc., etc. You all know the names. And we all go and get excited, and we all then get deflated. Now, when I wrote this piece, it was over the weekend. What has transpired since then, which will be detailed in the intel, suggests this Q, whoever it may be, is definitely in some sort of know. Otherwise, they wouldn't have certain details that have come from our show. You may see a lot more in the coming days when the intel is delivered. So this heightened increase that's come out of nowhere, and they all get different names and white hats and this and that, and it all goes up, and then it all fizzles out, and then it all, you know, it's all the same ingredients: heightened attention, heightened excitement, and then it starts to wobble a bit, and then flatlines as dates come and go. We've all seen it too many times before. What I don't want is to see that repeated again. And that's why I kept warning of the site QAnon. It wasn't really telling you anything new. It was just throwing out words that looked, when formed, when a lot of assumption was added in, could be formed into something that would be exciting to all of us, me included. Like I've said before, I would love Corey Goode's, all of Corey Goode's stuff to be correct. Every last word of it. It would be fantastic. I would love all of this Q stuff to be correct. Because we all want an end to the fun and games. But what I don't want is another flat line. We've had too many flat lines. When it's happening this week, next week, 2 weeks, and on it goes. And that's why I advised caution. The last couple of days I've seen a change in the Q narrative. I suggest that will continue. We'll see. But we're all tired of full-on distraction ploys from what was really going on. And the reality is, no real self-respected group would tell the world what they're doing in real time in these situations. You know, war, and we are in a war, in case people forget that, requires stealth and not to be splashed all over the internet for all to see and for the clowns to counteract. It's irresponsible. You know, one of the questions I was asked on Sunday, why were you selected? Because I'm responsible with the information. One of the reasons. Too many are looking to be the internet superstar and looking for likes and thousands of listeners spouting bullshit or copying opinion. None of it's based in hardcore facts, and this is the problem. So, outing certain things in a certain way in a war situation just doesn't happen that way unless you're 2 sandwiches short of a picnic, which kind of fits in with the clowns, really. Maybe it was them all along, who knows, time will tell. But I know many of you are struggling. Life's no bed of roses in this household either. We've just had a horrendous day, but life goes on. And this show is built around providing you, even without the intel, an insight of where you yourself can make and be the change. You know, the intel is a small portion of this show, apart from the occasional weeks where it's kind of voluminous, and this will be one of them. And our intel comes from the very top end of where the real stuff is happening. We've proven this time and time again. But people are always free to choose to believe what they want to believe. And whether they choose to believe it or not, that's their choice. But like I said, much of it has been proven to be fact. Why is it used after we've put it out on so many sites around the internet with no recognition? Not that I'm after recognition per se, but that is telling in itself. Even the mainstream media have ran a number of pieces that came from our show, both TV and newspapers. Now, like I said, we did the show with OYM, and it was kind of a challenge. And I welcomed it. But what people have to understand is it can sometimes be a burden having intel, as others can see you as being in a more beneficial position, and sometimes envy kicks in. And I get that, but it's not helping anyone. I don't care who's putting it out personally, as long as it's truthful and things happen. And some see it as having too much of an influence on things, and they send agents to attack and distract you, which I've had them in bucket loads over the last 12-18 months. Now, many know I rarely promote or big up myself. It's not who I am. But just maybe I was selected because A, I could handle it. You'd be surprised people who are given inside intel to help them understand things better suddenly lose it. I've seen it too many times. People think it's kind of easy knowing, being in the know. It's not, trust me. You hear far more bad news than you do good news, and you're carrying that around with you all day and all night. So there's very few who could handle it. I have proven I could handle it. B, I have responsibility with it. C, I have no rogue connections or criminal activity background, much to the chagrin of some people. D, proven to be a man of and for the people. That's what I'm about. I could be trusted, which again, trust, as I've mentioned in previous shows, is in short supply. Very short supply, sadly. Why? Because people don't trust themselves, so how can they trust anybody else? And the barriers go up, so everyone becomes a source of mistrust. But the core of the issues is people don't trust themselves. And finally, F, I have done the research over a long period of time. Long before I was getting intel, I had insights. So it's not just that the show has been bigged up because of the intel people will tell you that themselves. And we all learned eventually to discern better. The show provides insight. And also I can problem solve on my feet and provide a wealth of experiences to support it. That's why they chose to select me. Eventually everyone will get the news. Now recently we've had our groups being accused of being a cult. You have to laugh. That's always the stock answer for those with limited understanding. And it's also a cabal-oriented meme, dare I say. In case if you don't agree with their people or material, just label them a cult. You know? Well, they can call us whatever they like. But I have to say it's the strangest cult I've ever led or been involved in. As the leader doesn't have multiple wives or girlfriends, doesn't demand sex from his listeners, as in some cults, doesn't charge for the shows, documents, material, or ask for any compensation for the many who's helped privately overcome a range of issues. All been done free of charge. It's the strangest cult ever. Perhaps I've gone wrong somewhere, who knows. But sadly, the thinking process for too many is you are only valid if you are charging money for doing something. Well, why does it have to be that way? Can we all turn around and say that process has worked in the past? Clearly it's not, has it? When everything has to have a monetary value. How about doing things out of the kindness of your heart? Does everything have to be money oriented? No. Now, one of the things that came up in that show is some people don't like that I've outed or dissed certain alternative media, and yet many still ask my opinion on this one or that one. But you can't ask and then project on the person you asked if you don't agree with their opinion. You know, I've said this before, it's kind of unfair that those types of questions are put to me, and it kind of puts me on the spot in many ways. And the problem, like I said earlier, it comes down to a lack of self-trust, in essence. Because if you're asking those questions whether X, Y, or Z is right, good, or honest, it means you, the person who asked the question, don't trust that individual or group. And you're basically asking me to confirm your doubts. Now, sometimes I can add insight into certain things, but ultimately you yourself believe there's an element of doubt, and like I said, just wish for me to confirm what you already suspect. You know, a lot of this show is about self-empowerment and working on yourself, the shadow side, and doing your inner work. What is the truth? Well, if you do your inner work and operate out of the mind and into the heart, you'll find all the truths you ever needed. And one of the questions on OYM was kind of shortened, but it suggested that I had dissed Cobra, which is not exactly true. I suggested he was not the same person I spoke to 3 times. That's not dissing the man. That's stating what I feel, there's something not right. You know, in essence, Cobra, as we know him or knew him, depending on where you stand on it, dissed himself, not me. And perhaps a recap of the things Cobra stated on his shows and blogs, where he stated that there was no blue aliens, there was also no sphere beings. He then stated that Corey's whole story was based on an old book, which was later partially confirmed. And he also stated his sources and contacts says there was no evidence of Corey attending meetings with underground beings on Mars or the Kuiper Belt. Now, these are all things Cobra said about Corey, not me. I outed Corey first with the blue aliens, but that's by the by. But Cobra was asked the same questions, and they were his answers. So Cobra clearly believed on all levels that Corey Good's story was total bullshit. And then suddenly all that's forgotten by most, and Cobra and Corey are all good buddies and doing shows together. Now, unlike many, I have a long memory, and I'm not prone to 4-year loop stories. And until Cobra himself explains valid reasons for what is essentially a full 180, then he has dissed himself, not me. I just questioned the full-on change. Cliff High was another name that came up. Now, many were trashing Cliff 4 years ago. Now, all of a sudden, people are defending him. Personally, I have no issue with Cliff High. None. I have issues with the data. And here's why. To me, his info is kind of take it or leave it. It has no impact in real terms. His info is clever, as he is based in what is largely, it's based on web traffic in general, and certain things crop up after the info is run through a database, which is possibly an AI, but I can't confirm that, and it will spit out words or sentences that are current. And from there, Cliff makes it into a narrative. Now, much of it, for those of you who listen, is projection, bits of prophecy, and some wild guesses. Because he's not formulating the data. The data formulates itself. You know, sometimes he predicts silver's going to $10,000 an ounce, and gold's from 300 to... you know, something ridiculous, you know. $3,000 to $100,000 an ounce of gold. But to be fair to Cliff, like I said, he doesn't determine the data. It's all the web bot. Now, he did one show, which I think was with Randy Morgans, where he said his whole web bot data set was off because Corey Good and the Blue Chicken Group was skewing the data. For those of you who follow Cliff, you'll remember that show. So the question now is, what if this guy Q is not valid? Q's putting out a lot of mass arrest, and this is Podesta, Mueller, and all kinds of names. If all that is wrong, and some of it's not, I will state that, that will then skew all Cliff's data again. So then Cliff comes out and does his piece based on what is the most prevalent news item, which is Q. So you can see where it can quite quickly all go wrong, because suddenly there's been a mass injection of data in the one field, like the Corey Good and the Blue Chicken Group, and it set all the data off. Now Cliff, as I said, the info which he presents, he does very well. But you can't say it's based on fact. The above statement about his data being off because of Corey Good proves that. So again, I've not said anything that wouldn't be considered out of order. Cliff High has stated himself his data stream can be distorted, and that to me makes it unreliable. It's interesting to listen to, but you can't base it in fact. I was accused of shredding Corey and Wilcock. Yes, absolutely. There's been enough said by me on that. And the key aspect is they are paid to operate and relay material, albeit dubious, via Gaia TV, which is operated by the Covens. For those of you who are not familiar with the Covens, these are a dark magician group that operates and controls many aspects of our lives, not just ET narrative. And Covens operate to play games with humanity, not serve it. And this is my real reason for outing them. But there's a plethora of things they have said that has changed their narrative. Again, that's not down to me. I didn't ask them to change their narrative. I just pointed it out. Corey has stated he is part of an FBI program where he reports back to them. He also admitted working for government agencies, training them to produce trolls and shills for the alternative media. He admitted it. So my question is for the people who question my stance and ignore the fact that both are paid agents of the Covens. The question is being an FBI agent and a shill trainer for the government that trains shills to disrupt the alternative media, someone who we in the alternative media should blindly trust? That's not a statement, that's a question. You know, and that's without the latest $6,000 for his wife's teeth. You know what I mean? How's that helping disclosure? And the $12,000 received for him to move house, when his blue avian friends can allegedly move him instantaneously to Mars in the Kuiper Belt, but suddenly can't move him and his belongings in the same state. You know, you just can't make this stuff up. Well, they did. Many fell for it. And sadly, too many still do. I mean, $6,000 for his wife's teeth. Perhaps I'll do a GoFundMe and have my ass hairs manicured. See how much I get. Dear me. It just boggles my mind. Another the OIM listener brought up was Michael Saller. Again, no relevant background, but again is put up as a trusted source. For those of you unfamiliar with Mr. Saller, who's part of the Blue Chicken Group, Mr. Saller came on board back in 2003 with Alfred Weber, who I might add worked in the Jimmy Carter administration as a politician and is also a DC bar lawyer. Again, with Alfred, should be automatically trusted with that background. Anyway, Alfred was part of a setup called exopolitics.org, a group covering ET-based narrative around the government suppression of the knowledge of ETs. Now, Alfred stated directly to Michael Saller that a whole heap of his information that Mr. Saller was putting out was flawed, and Alfred had the proof of such, particularly the Mars information. And Alfred also exposed Mr. Saller and his wife, not me. And basically they were running a commercial enterprise based largely on material Alfred had shared with them. And then they stole Alfred's material and threw him out of the group to stop Alfred from exposing them. Saller and his wife, who were both part of an occult ritual and ceremony groups, confirmed, by the way, used Alfred, and then when commercial aspect was up and running, discarded them, and this goes back to 2003 through 2011. So again, now Mr. Saller is involved with another commercial enterprise around the Gaia TV. Again, should we really be trusting Michael Saller with that background? Again, that's a question, it's not a statement. Jordan say that. Questioning by me, why? Is because he's connected with Wilcock and Corey Good to Gaia and the Covens. Again, another person who came out of nowhere and suddenly has vast major numbers watching his shows. When there's people like Randy Morgans, who's been around a while and done a vast array of shows, and wonders where all Jordan's followers come from. It doesn't make sense. Now, his first interview Jordan did was with Robert David Steele, which I personally and others have since agreed with, found indicative. Robert David Steele, as he is the likely source of Jordan's information and video. Robert David Steele is not ex-CIA, but current, operating from Norway via the NATO crew who are pushing for war with Russia, all at the behest of the Rothschilds goons. Personally, I hope Jordan steps out of that group if he can. He may not be allowed to, as I think he's good at what he does. He comes across very well and would potentially appeal to the more younger listeners rather than old gits like me. I hope he steps out, because he will appeal to the youth. Simon Parks was another one that came up in the OYM. Again, he came in a blaze of publicity. I gave him a chance. I listened despite knowing he's part manted, a son of Anu, the Lord, Draco King. His human birth parents both worked for the CIA and MI5-6, and they are also an Illuminati family, and on top of all that, Mr. Parks was a politician. You know, again, I ask, should we in the alternative community blindly trust someone with that sort of background? I personally don't think so. But then that's just me. Over time, those doubts have been proven more correct than not. Now, Simon Parkes, I outed because he used his abilities to sexually interfere with the alternative community clients he was seeing. At least 5 or 6 that came forward. There may have been more, which he admitted to. He then blamed it on Anu. But again, I'm accused of being the one who's just going around dissing everybody. It's time people started questioning their narrative and proof of who they operate for and by, in my opinion. And not just leave it all to me. Same with Keenan. I didn't expose Keenan for spouting bullshit, although I couldn't have gone on and on about the bullshit that came out of his mouth. But for defrauding people of money and working for the Chinese elders and subsequently the Rothschilds. He defrauded Drake, and yet Drake defended him and threw me under the bus, saying I was the bad guy. And yet again, the stuff I outed on Keenan was all proven as fact over time. Now, the final one, I'm going to go before we go on to other pieces. There's just one or two here. Is James Gilliland. You know, I remember James from the past talking about channeling and Pleiadians saving us, and so I never particularly listened to the guy. You know, that's just my choice, and I think by now most people realise why Drake and I banned channeling posts back in Cosmic Voice. I think you all now know where it comes from. Certainly not good ETs, put it that way. But my issue with James is he's pushing the RV. That's it. If he wants to tell us Pleiadians are saving us and he's channeled Yahweh or channeled whatever, that to me doesn't make... I'm not really interested. It's just BS and that's it. But what he's doing is he's pushing the RV, which has been exposed ad nauseum as a Rothschild's global takeover plan. And aside from the fact that the Chinese elders and dragons are either bogus and or ran by reptilians. Again, why are we listening to people pushing this stuff? Well, maybe you're not right about the reptilians. Well, what about the Red Dragon? Another one who came in a blaze of glory, then wobbled and then flatlined out. He admitted that the top of the tree of the dragon groups is reptilian. They were the ones who were controlling the World Trust. They were the ones that gave the Rothschilds 20 trillion in the 1500s to build up the Rothschild empire. Didn't give any money to America, and yet now all of a sudden these Chinese elders, now they haven't got the accounts, suddenly decide they want to give money to America. They never give us a single cent while they had control of the World Trust. Nothing. And James Gilliland has been spoken to personally and told all this a number of times. And yet he still pushes a cabal bailout, which would, in essence, lead to an end of humanity. That's what we're facing with the RV. Then they would have the funds to do what the hell they like. But again, according to some, I'm the bad guy for exposing these people. but with a tiny amount of research, all the above that I've stated can be found out for yourself, whether you listen to this show or the OYM show or any other show. It's all there. And until you do it for yourself, then I politely ask is please quit dissing the people who have done the research and the investigations on it and then have relayed it to the listeners. You know, this is not like political parties and soccer rivalry of our group, our party, or our team is better than yours. At the end of the day, this is all about our freedom and our future. And I have to remind you all, we're only going to get one chance at this. And the alternative community was set up for people who think outside the box, recognise there is something radically wrong with this world, and recognise we've been fed a whole load of bullshittery all our lives. And we've wished to seek out knowledge, truth and solutions to go forward in a better way. And the above people, to varying degrees, are muddying the waters and stealing off people in the community. Accountability. You know, we want our politicians, we want the Departments of Justice, we want the FBI and the Federal Reserve, the IRS and the military all held accountable. We shouldn't be any different in the alternative community. People are distorting your path to knowledge. Those people should just be shut off. We did offer an olive branch. Both Randy and I offered Corey an olive branch last year. He ignored it. It's not a surprise to us, because we knew right from the off, both of us. We knew the Corey story before he went big. Now, the reality is, like I said, I don't really like outing people, but I will not stand by and watch frauds destroy the freedom movement. Like I said, I can ignore most of the bullshit. I just won't listen to it. People send me videos, oh, this is really funny what Drake and Kent Dunn and the channeler Sam Muggsy are saying. It's just a waste of my energy to me. If people want to amuse themselves, fine. But it's the overarching agenda, then that is when I then turn around and say something. Like last year, we had a lot of reporting of George Webb. And I listened, and then I investigated, as his narrative appeared to be slanted in favour of one faction, the Zionists. And then Mr. Webb admits, when he was questioned, that he's working with Mossad and had leanings towards Israel. Fine. You know, that's not to denigrate all of his material. What that is to point out is his material will be slanted in the favour of a certain faction. And this is a lot of what's going on in the mainstream media now. Mueller and Schumer against Trump and Kushner. It doesn't take much to work out what factions are playing against each other with that. So Mr. Webb's material, I'm not discounting, because he will be exposing the other four factions, which is fine to me. He doesn't appear, other than his leanings to Israel, and there's, or more patently the Zionists. Fine, if he's going to out people, carry on. But this is the problem. You have to be aware he is still attached to their system, not ours. And that's what I've tried to help people with. This same faction slanted narrative Also applies, as I mentioned earlier, to Robert David Steele, Catherine Fitz, Alex Jones, and Jared Rand. Again, I'll repeat, that does not mean you should discount all of their material, but you have to be aware it is faction-based material and not people-based material. We'll still get disclosure out of it. But as long as you've got that, where you're not going all in with the information, you pull out what you need, then we can go forward with it. So, according to some on the internet, we're going to get a load of mass arrests, and we'll see how that unfolds. But here is something I want each listener to ponder on. If that takes place, what happens next? How will you feel? Now, if your answer is elated and justice will be served, my question is still, what happens next? If your answer was cool, now we have an opportunity to move forward and step into their shoes and do better, I have no further questions. It's something to ponder on, because it is important and it will be important. Here's something to mess with your head again. We have often heard about Muslim camps on our soil in America, and Russian and Chinese camps. But isn't it funny they've never mentioned the Nazi base on our soil, don't you think? I'll let you ponder on that and I'll reply later. One of the things I've constantly referenced is consumerism and how it's killing us. And the latest shops of this week of Amazon and Apple with no staff. No staff equals no jobs, equals no pay, equals no pay equals no one buying their goods. So short of bringing in a load of aliens with a bunch of dollars and dinars, how is losing 800 million jobs to robots going to keep their current consumer system going? Good question. You know, the things people buy these days just never ceases to astound me. I must buy this, as famous names written on it, and bags and cosmetics and perfume, and it just goes on and on. You know, Nike shoes and Jordan shoes or whatever his name is. Yeah. Why have we allowed ourselves to do that? It's senseless. You know, I mean, Jennifer Aniston's perfume and Cindy Crawford's makeup. You know, that what difference will that make for, let's use an example, Karen Hudas? Will it make her look more appealing? No. So why did we buy it? You know, something really doesn't make sense in how they are operating currently. I suspect they may not be operating for much longer, but we've heard that before. But unless there's a push for a basic income pay system to replace all the jobs, it all sounds very nice. But until the clowns and the psychos are removed, we must avoid the seducements they will offer, in my opinion. No staff, 800 million jobs going. Who's going to buy? Who's going to have anything left to buy anything with no jobs? Another example of the cabal insanity where they want to chew at both ends. Who knows? Now, this came up, has come up a number of times, but it raised its head again this week. And I've often praised our members and listeners at various times. But a few things that have cropped up recently where a number of members are falling into the programming trap again. I wish we would all avoid that. And for those like me who see patterns quickly, you learn to spot it a mile off. Like the pattern when every financial downfall occurs, do people, not only in this country, because I've heard people in back home where I was born in the UK, they do exactly the same thing. And people suddenly start blaming the illegals and immigrants for the financial downfall. Every single time a financial troubles occur, it's blame the illegals and blame the immigrants. Where people go back to the lowest denominated thinking process. It's all the illegals' fault. Yeah, right. You know, to me, that is at best shallow thinking. At worst, it's shameful. It just is. You know, I could sit here for the next 24 hours and give you all more valid reasons for financial failure in this country and every other country before coming anywhere near illegals or immigrants. It's bad, you know, for several reasons. How about why are you overlooking the 23.5 trillion missing from the DoD money? Or the fact that, or missing the fact that the military takes the vast quantity of our budget, add in the Federal Reserve, the Crown and the IRS for that matter. Or are you forgetting who or what brought them here? Could it be our ridiculous foreign policy or the false flag events? Hello, Haiti. Hello, Puerto Rico. Now, one of the reasons for bringing in immigrants to a country is it increases the per head funds to that country. Another reason is the Western countries are having less babies. They needed 2.2 children per family to keep their Ponzi system going. And the financials is one giant Ponzi scheme. And the birth rates for Western countries is down to around 1.1. So they're a baby short. So they bring in peoples from countries who have a lot more kids. This keeps their pension fraud going. You know, another reason is the elephant is now in full view and yet you still don't see it and just blame the lowest denominator. It's the illegals' fault. It's the immigrants. Or you are forgetting the main issue is what I'd like everyone to think on. And not only remember this, but word it, because it is correct. How can you be illegal on your own planet? You know, that line of thinking that somebody's illegal is cabal speak. It's all divide and conquer. And if to be able to move forward as a species, that way of thinking, which to me is abhorrent and absurd, and it has to stop. Now, the absurdity of it all is there are real illegal aliens, as in non-terrestrial aliens living here, and have been influencing things badly for humanity for a long time. But you never hear oh, let's deport them. But the funny thing is, most people in the alternative media would love to meet an ET and invite them into the home. And that's great. But if you won't invite your fellow man into a country and share it, why would ET even bother to go and meet you? I hope we put an end to that line of thinking. It is bad. Oh, where are we? One of the worst things that has happened to not only this country, but all westernised countries, is the cabal core pirate takeover of everything, so they have fingers in all the pies and subsequently make money on every level and every transaction. And this has a major impact on the whole economy, not just an individual country, the whole lot. But the biggest thing it has done is to stifle growth. And I had a rather interesting discussion with a member this week, and we talked about the lack of entrepreneurial spirit. It was the entrepreneurial spirit which was alive and kicking in the early growth of America that has now been crushed by the avalanche of greed merchants, patent deniers, ideas stolen, people threatened, people killed, all because they want everything. But the bizarre thing is, they can still have everything and still provide growth in ideas, technology, health improvements, water cleansers, new energy modes and models, organic farming, anti-gravitic travel, and many others that would actually benefit humanity and also the planet. You know, there's an absolute vast array of people, even those connected to this group, who have got loads of ideas of how we can move forward in a better way, to implement new ideas, new ways of living, new ways of operating, new thinking. And it's all denied because largely a relatively few old bastards are still stuck in their one-track tiny minds, with zero expansion for growth, not only for the now, but for our very future. The reality is these people have had their time and game. And whilst they may have collected resources, bits of paper, titles and control, what in real terms have they done with it? Nothing of any real value anyway. It's all shallow and hollow ideologies. But the key is they haven't managed to do it very well. They have failed spectacularly. And our lesson is to learn to grow and step into their roles and do it, more importantly, in a better way. And we must be better. And not for the benefit of the few either, but for the benefit of the all. And in my opinion, we don't have much to beat. But we will have a lot of hard work to achieve the desired result we all want. Because if you think it's going to be easy to re-educate the whole populace, think again. The programming runs deep, as covered in the last piece. Blame the illegals. They're the problem. No, please. But with an injection of free thinking, tolerant and caring people, backed with a return to the entrepreneurial spirit that encompasses a will to improve one and all, and not just for how much you can make or profit, then we have a real future to look forward to. But when it happens, it's still only an opportunity. There is no guaranteed success. That is down to we the people. Final piece before I go into a music break. Did you work out where the Nazi base is on our own soil yet? You're all thinking now. In light of all the alternative media exposés, maybe this is what we should all go forward with, yourself included. Forgiveness works sometimes. That was Shinedown and How Did You Love? It's not what you believe, it's how did you love. And the previous song was Forgiveness. You know, the first thing that starts with forgiveness is forgiveness of the self. Whether you are the perpetrator of crimes or poor behaviour, or you are the receiver. And the same applies with trust. A lot of the questions, as I pointed out earlier, is because people haven't learned to trust themselves. And that's a shame. You know, I've done it myself for long enough. In the end, the constant messages and the intuition being proven correct time and time again, multiple times a day in some cases, you have to let it go and go with the flow. What that then means is that you're not operating from the mind. And it's not an easy process, operating from the heart. It's quite painful in many ways. Suddenly your empathy button goes to heightened levels. But that's what it takes. So you're not susceptible to, or less susceptible to, the programming. Because programming is programming the mind, not the heart. They can't do that. Only you can block it. They can't. That's why they use the mind program. That's why TV is called programming. Programming for the mind. But if you have learned to balance the mind and the heart, you recognise it as such straight away and just shut it off. But if you're operating solely from the mind with the chatter and not from the heart centre, then you're always going to struggle. So what I would love to see is everyone learning to trust themselves more. Not just believing in me, but trusting yourself. Let your own intuition, your higher self, lead you where to go, because it will not lead you astray. Once you give yourself over to that way of being, you will not be led astray. Once you hand over your power and stay in the mind centre, you're allowing others to run your life. Others' way of thinking, other ways of acting, other ways of being. It's not you, it's somebody else's program. And that's going to be the key forward. This is why we've focused heavily on the psychological side of this show since we started THI back in May of 2016. Almost 20 months old now. It's like I asked the question before, what happens next? All the mass arrests take place, what happens next? Well, unless we step up, nothing. They'll just insert another clown. And that's where we have to be careful. So I left you hanging before the music. Did you work out where the Nazi base was? Some of you may. The answer was Langley. A lot of you will have missed that. And therein lies the problem. The elephant in the room. The focus is on Muslims and Russian and Chinese being on American soil, and oh, let's all shit our pants because they're coming for us, when we've had a Nazi base here since the Second World War, dictating foreign policy, corporate, banking, government, and the White House. And it always gets overlooked. Right, we have some intel. Buckle up, because here we go. First off, I want to say the Hawaiian missile. There was no missile fired. There was no missile shot down. That incident did not take place. 100% confirmed. I don't care who's putting it out. What I'm telling you is that didn't take place. There's no evidence for it, and there's reasons as to why it can't take place. Because the codes for launching stuff like that is no longer in their control. Oops. It's fear-mongering again over that side of the world, and we've had a lot of that, and I will tell you why in another intel piece later on, but bear that in mind. The Davos meeting, which is taking place this week, and some are expecting things may be said or take place in there. I will tell you, it's a load of nothing and not of any value. So don't go looking for pointers in that meeting. It will be a gathering of people who are basically crapping their pants, thinking, how will we get out of this mess? Again, as the intel unfolds, you'll realise why. Item 3. The Rothschilds, clowns, goons. I run out of words for them, that family. And the Chinese elders were again asked on Monday for payments by the military, the Pentagon and the United States government, known as the RV. It didn't materialise. Go figure. Not telling you nothing new with that. It just rolls on and on. So what happened next on Monday, apart from a load of chaos and a lot of mudslinging and a lot of threats and some rather hasty and volatile meetings, the World Trust, which is connected to this show, for those that listen regularly, stepped in. And Mr. Trump was directly shown the evidence and then confirmed the existence and proof of funds via the World Trust. Then the World Trust gave an emergency liquidity fund, was then supplied to the US Treasury and the US government, which cancelled the shutdown of the government. So our team stepped in and prevented the continuation of the shutdown Monday afternoon. this didn't please the Rothschilds and the bogus Chinese elders, as you can imagine. And their reaction was, they then promised the US government, the military and the Pentagon, they would deliver the payments, the RV, again on Tuesday. And that failed again. And now it's going to all be delivered tomorrow, Friday. And we all know by now where that will go, don't we? Fail again. Except this time there is a stronger drive by the people supporting the RV to not support it anymore. And Monday's emergency funds rolled out. Chaos on all levels, as not only was the funds delivered as promised, but also now the whole world knows we being the World Trust, the only working live codes into the banking system. Subsequently, amid all the chaos, and was expected, in came the threats to the American government, threatening the United States of America with all kinds unless they stopped dealing with the World Trust people. And major disruptions have ensued. And a lot of very panicked and worried people right now are not dealing with things too well. Next item. Remember we put out the story, it's probably about 6-7 months ago maybe, where the American military had sold off all the military equipment to the Chinese, the elders, not the government, in return for more funds. Well, the deal was we had to sell, we being America, all or most of our military hardware in return for receiving funds to keep the US military and the country going. In that order, I might add. And then what happened is the Chinese then loaned back all the military equipment at a cost until they demanded delivery. Well, now we have a problem, because now they are demanding delivery of all our military equipment. Oops. So our military is now in deep poop of what to do. And for those of you who don't know, the military have been operating on Rothschilds and Chinese elders funds, which is ran through the DoD vouchers. Nothing major in the way of funds, but a sufficient flow of money to keep going. And now the military realises they've been put, and ultimately have put this country in dire jeopardy. Their only way out of this mess now is via the World Trust, which is us. But the Rothschilds and the Chinese elders have threatened, if they attempt, they being the military, to pull funds out of the World Trust account, the Chinese will cut off their funding and demand military equipment straight away. And it will also pull all support funding to the Pentagon. So, say the military wanted a small liquidity fund to keep going, the Roths and the Chinese will cut off the funding that they've been given them and demand all our military equipment and cut the support to the Pentagon. Now, quite how America's top brass got into this mess is beyond me, and no doubt it will be debated long and hard into the future. But where do we stand now? Well, the military is in a giant pickle, and it's backed into a corner with potentially no funding and no equipment. And now they have a real defined choice that will have to be made by them in the next 24 to 72 hours, I suspect. I don't think it will go on longer. To either go without funding and wait for the RV, that will never happen, or get funding from the World Trust, but with conditions of cleaning house and operating in a better way. That's what they face in the next 24 to 72 hours. We may have a decision within the next 24 hours on that. I hope they make the right choice. But even if they don't, the world will all see who the problem really is. That's why I did the piece last Saturday night after Hayden's show. That's why I did the piece last Thursday also. They've been the problem all along. And that's why I find it rather shallow blaming illegals. They sold all, not their military equipment, I might add, because they didn't pay for it. The people paid for all the military equipment. And they sold it to the Chinese. You know, those scary people that are always coming to get us like the Russians. They sold it all. And like the 23.5 trillion that's just vanished into thin air. Not one head has rolled. So where does the World Trust stand? Well, we've gained a lot of traction this week. We've spoken to a number of people, top people. Some were helpful, some continued the nonsense, and some were exposed as frauds that we suspected to begin with. But where we have gained traction is in the military to set up to a certain level, in the agencies up to a certain level, and the Pentagon to a certain level, and largely the United States government. The United States government is now pushing all financial entities to work with Miss Manor and the World Trust. What that means is once those contracts are signed and done and dusted, the World Trust funds will be released. Let's all cheer. So the US government is now pushing all financial entities to work with the World Trust. That's why I played the opening song, Hero of the Day. The people connected with myself and this show are all heroes of the day. You have no idea the threats, the amount of hours, the bullshit, the drivel those people have had to hear from clowns. And we've retained our dignity and kept going forward with the truth. Dinar Land people are suddenly coming out of their collective stupidity trance and are now seeing the real truth also. Of not only the bullshit of the Chinese elders and the Rothschilds, but the proof of them hacking the system every time they throw out a date for the RV. So every time you see a date for the RV on the alternative media, those clowns are trying to hack the financial system and get money out of the World Trust so they can set up their RV. Every single time. And they've been shown the evidence. So this week, knowing that we had live codes, a challenge went out for the people in Dinar land, and the challenge was, show us the codes. We will produce our live codes, and you go and speak to the Chinese elders to produce theirs. Well, they couldn't produce anything. Go figure. And a case of a massive oops. So now a whole load of Dinar people are and have started to jump ship, again in support of the World Trust. Now, I don't have much sympathy with them, being quite honest, the Dinar people. They have been told repeatedly it was bullshit, year after year. Sadly, their numbers are dwindling now, and only the single-cell amoeba thinking people are left amongst them now who still believe in the Rothschilds, the Chinese elders and the RV. All else are jumping ship. So, with the in the background of all that, the Roths, being the sneaky, sly serpents they are, fired up the black screen. This is the hidden banking system that's located inside the UN building. Go figure. And then started creating SKRs to try and transfer fake SKRs, which is safe keeping receipts, IOUs, basically to you and I. Transfer these fake SKRs out so they can allocate real funds against it. Except no one would issue certificates, coin or currencies for their fake SKRs. No one. Oops. So now the Rothschilds, disingenuous as they are trying to force the US government to issue a new note. We've all heard them before. USN, TRN, you name it. I mean, how many more fake notes do you want in circulation? You have to laugh. But here's the real note to you, Rothschilds. That went out to the entire Rothschild family, Chinese elders, fake dragon groups, and Dinar land people, the ones that are left anyway. So I hope you enjoyed that intel. There's more to come yet. Well, perhaps I do a quick revision on the military. The military are up Schitt's Creek. The United States military are up Schitt's Creek without a paddle. They've been getting the funding because they're in bed operating with the Rothschilds and the Chinese elders. And then they did a huge deal where they sold all the American military equipment to the Chinese to keep them going, and loaned or leased all the equipment back on the condition that one day the Chinese elders and the Rothschilds would demand their equipment, or could. Well, now they have. So the military is backed into a corner. The military have been supporting the Rothschilds and the Chinese elders at what you'd have to say against the wishes of the people of America if they knew. And the World Trust, Miss Manor and the rest of our team, provided a fund to keep or to reopen the American government. So we proved we had the funds and we had the codes. So now the military are backed into a corner. They either take some funds from the World Trust to keep them going, because their funds will not last through till February the 8th, as I understand it. The government's funds will. So they either keep taking off the Rothschilds and the Chinese elders, or they get a temporary fund from the World Trust. Should they do that, the Roths and the Chinese elders have threatened to cut off their funding altogether, demand all our military equipment, which means planes, warships, everything. They sold it all. And the Roths will also stop providing funding support to the Pentagon as well. So now they have a choice of which is likely to come in the next 24 to 72 hours. Because the Rothschilds and the Chinese elders will not deliver the payments again tomorrow with their bogus RV. Like I said earlier, when they had control of the accounts over in Asia and the Dragon groups, they never gave America a single cent. And yet, we're able to give the Rothschilds 20 million back in 1520. 20 million's a lot of money now. Imagine how much it was back then. Out of the people's trust. It's not their trust. So that's where the military stand. They have a real choice to make. They either support America and get us back into a program of doing things in a better way via the World Trust, which clears all the debt and provides funding for projects in this country which will create millions of jobs. Or they continue with the Rothschilds, Chinese elders plan, which will end up with a permanent government shutdown, and we will lose millions of jobs. I hope they make the right choice, because now the American people, because this will go out. This show goes further than people realise, including myself, sometimes. It will go out. You're now in a spot, you sold this country out, and you now are backed into a corner where you have to make a choice. I hope you make the right one. People will have a long memory. Right, back to the intel. The guy who created the credit card system and its core of operation, I think it was either today or yesterday, was threatened and told, today it was, he was told and it was demanded of him to crash the whole global credit card system worldwide for tomorrow, Friday. Why? Well, it will obviously create much panic, chaos and confusion, which will then overlook the fact that the Rothschilds and the Chinese elders have not delivered the payments again tomorrow. Distraction event. an inconvenient and convenient diversion. Suffice to say, the demands will not be met. Too many are watching now. Far too many, for their liking anyway. Whilst I didn't get all the details, I don't think it's important. It only creates fear. But there has been a number of major false flag events over the last few weeks, and their attempts to do so have ramped up exponentially. Again, this is a distraction tactic because they're losing, and losing badly. Everything they do now fails. And I kept saying this a long time ago, all your big plans will fail. Perhaps they should have listened to this show. Well, I digress. And they are trying to do, what they're hoping to do with the false flag is a much larger event than even 9/11 was. But rest assured, all their attempts have failed to date. And I will tell you, we have big eyes and large ears everywhere stopping this shit. And that's 24/7. The days of that type of stuff is coming to a close. Now, ongoing as we speak, there are high-level meetings going on all over the world, currently thrashing out all kinds of details and deals, and there are flies on the wall which will be listening, and they will be smiling. Maybe not in the Rothschild camp, but there you go. Many have noticed the increase in chemtrails. Well, what I will tell you is, yes, it has been noted, and an increase in anti-chemtrail spraying has also increased. This is to stop the virus genocide that they've been trying to do since 2015. Yes, again, it failed. Now, remember, I mentioned earlier about North Korea. Now, the North Korea issue is not solely about Kim Jong. Yet again, it's the Rothschilds spin their web of evil fun and games. It was the Rothschilds who convinced North Korea to build weapons. Why? Because they don't have any. Oops. Just as well. So, if you put two and two together, you now understand some of the rhetoric regarding North Korea. There's bits hidden in there. So, the other thing that's become an issue to the Rothschilds is they don't have the nuclear codes anymore. The entity known as M, who was one of the code holders of the nuclear codes, for people who remember the show back then, he was deleted back in 2015. No more Mr. M. The codes for any nuclear missiles are not in their hands anymore and can no longer operate them. This reconfirms today what we've been saying even as far back in the CV days, Cosmic Voice. Now, the other thing that was related today was something that I put out sometime last year, where I asked you to consider the theory, which is partially, from my point of view, based in fact, about where our heat source was coming from. And I'd stated it comes from within the planet, and I did a drawing of how it takes place, the torus, and not from the object in the sky. Now, some agree with it and some didn't. Or perhaps this may explain it more. So this was explained in detail to our whole team today. And we all know how the planet is tilted. And just checking there, thought it had gone off again. And that is being managed currently to move it back onto its axis without causing tsunamis and plate shifts and all the rest. Now, what was relayed today is not only is the heat source coming from the poles, but also pure source energy. Now, this was known in the past. Some people who have been to Russia, because it's nearer the pole, have said the energies and frequencies there are off the charts. Everyone just feels better, particularly if you go to St. Petersburg. And the fact it was pure source energy. Some people might call it the God particle, whatever you choose to call it, was known in the past many, many thousands of years ago, and was harnessed until the many repeated fun and games kicked off on this planet. Of course, we had the Atlantean Wars and bullshittery, the Draco, the Reptilian Wars, and the created floods, which all but destroyed the source energy. And it is suspected that the Atlantean War was when the planet ended up off its axis. So the source energy comes out of a torus shape out of both poles. And when the system is working correctly, the shape that forms in an even spread across the whole planet is the flower of life. And this planet had it in the past. And this is why that shape is documented in every country all over the world. Now, one of the plans, which I'll get into in a minute, is there was 7 arcs dotted all around the world, and I'm kind of speculating here because there was that much details to take down. But these arcs were placed, Ark of the Covenant being one, Ark of Gabriel, but there were 7 in total that were placed in specific points on the earth, so it provided a balanced system that contained the source energy also. It can also be weaponized, like everything else with those psychopaths. They think everything needs to be weaponized. Now, that was done after one of the catastrophes or wars on this planet. A further attempt to re-harness that energy, which again was prevented by wars or deliberate interference here, but at a separate time, was the pyramids. Again, it was about harnessing source energy through the pyramids in a specific pattern, which then created the flower of life. Now, one of the things that's being proposed that I've mentioned previously is the insertion of rods into the planet, which will not only stabilize it and put it back on its axis, but it will also create weather conditions more conducive for the whole planet once it goes back on its axis. Basically, that there won't be the extremes of the cold, severe north and severe south, and there won't be extreme heat around the equator. Basically, the whole planet will end up with what was classed as a Mediterranean style weather pattern. So there won't be excessive temperatures. For instance, like Florida at 95 plus humidity 110, and and some of the desert places where it's in the summer it's over 100. That will be lowered to 70 through 85. But the colder places, Canada, Europe, Russia, will also experience the same, because there will be the even flow, and it won't be allowed with the tilt, sending it summer, winter, summer, winter. Now, with these rods, as they're placed in specific points, starting off at the center of the Earth, it then creates a system when you put sufficient poles in, which is rumored to be 60 when we get to 64, which doubles each time because of the effects. Those rods will then create the pattern of the flower of life, and it will distribute pure source energy across the whole planet. This will then not only improve human life, because we're getting source energy, the frequencies are better, our health will not deteriorate like it does now because we're in a sick system, but it will also improve the output and growth of plants, vegetation, fruit, animals, fish, all living things. A timeline? I can't say. We weren't given a timeline, but I don't think it's that far away. But it starts at the two poles. Magnetic north, magnetic south, and that's where source energy came from. Of course, as the planet descended, so did its people. And maybe that explains last week when I asked why everything that comes here, not just humans or Draco, but the angels and the animals and the fish and the birds, they're all predatory. But it's a sick system. Maybe that's the real reason why. It's been cut off from the source energy. So work will be underway to correct that, and that will change everything, regardless of whether there's mass arrests or there's financial changes or whatever. With the source energy, a lot of the greed and the violence and the poor behaviour and criminality will fade away. It won't support it. So that's the intel for tonight. A much more positive outlook. I'm going to skip the questions tonight. We've kind of run out of time, and I've had a rather busy day myself. But summing up is there's a potential for some real change in the next 24 to 72 hours. Like I mentioned earlier, the military have a choice. You best make the right one, because the people will all know. It's as simple as that. You've sold this country out for long enough, and it's time you put the people first. And like I said, if Trump delivers all that, hands up, fair enough. But they have to deliver, and that's the key. What Trump has now seen with his own eyes is there's no doubts which group is interested in benefiting the all and which group isn't. There's no doubt which group wants to go forward and create projects for the benefit of humanity and jobs and get people to thrive. And the program of the Rothschilds and the old guard wants to carry on controlling people, stifling people, making people struggle, making people die. To me, it's a no-brainer. But we have to be aware there's the elements of threats. Those people are nasty. To them, life doesn't matter. It's only them winning that matters. And if you happen to get in the way, then they'll stamp you into the ground, 6 foot into the ground. They don't care. They never did. And if you have any doubts, the fact that the Chinese gave them 20 million to get started in the 1500s tells you where they lie. And when I say Chinese, I want to make this quite clear. This is not the Chinese government. Nothing to do with the Chinese government. Our people, the World Trust in this manner, have delivered all the evidence of collusion, fraud, corruption, threats, not only to certain individuals but to the whole of humanity, to the Chinese government. They will act. And then we can move on to a better life, and I hope that happens sooner rather than later. I know we're all tired. Well, I don't think the full scope of what has taken place here will be realised until a much later date. What we were actually taking on, what we were working with, little resources, much threats, people selling out because they've got no nerve or no balls, or people selling out because they want a fistful of dinars that thinks they're going to make them billionaires. Yeah, right, good luck with that. It won't work. It never was going to work. So, will the military do the right thing? I may have a special show in the next 24 to 72 hours if certain things come to light, whichever way that goes. Or I may do a long post, we'll see. But the fight is now being taken to them. They're running far and wide, and all they have left is threats. we've got them on the run. The fulcrum is slipping, and that slope is getting steeper for them. As we rise, they fall. And I can't see, never one for making predictions, I can't see that changing. I only see that escalating. And we will get that opportunity to be something different and do something better. Like I said, it's only an opportunity. It's not a given. Right, we're at the end of the show. Apologies for those who asked questions. I think there was enough in the show to get you to listen again, maybe once. Maybe twice. Or maybe like Robert Baxter, about 40 times he's listened to Miss Manor. Right, I hope you enjoyed the show. It was a little bit more upbeat. There's still fun and games going on. Well, we're seeing light at the end of the tunnel. We may need sunglasses soon. This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. Bye for now.